Hello, friends. This is the Nope Coach episode 373. I'm your host, Suzanne Kohlberg, and today I'm going to try something a little bit different because, I'm a fan of the fuck around and find out factor. I write a mostly weekly newsletter. Sometimes there's two in a week, sometimes there's one every 2 weeks. I don't stick to a schedule for the sake of a schedule. And the newsletter that I wrote last week has been by far my most responded to newsletter. So for today's episode, I figure that I will read it out to you and then continue to riff. If you aren't yet receiving my newsletters, if you go to my website, suzannekohlberg.com/newsletter, you can sign up there. I'll also put a link in the episode description. My newsletters tend to be unique content. So you won't find them on the podcast. You won't find them on the YouTube. I love writing. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I get even deeper and realer and rawer, if that's a word, with my newsletter. So the subject of this newsletter was, what is coaching? And if you've already read it, if you're listening and you're on the list, keep listening because, as I said, I'll keep riffing at the end. So what is coaching? Some services are easy to describe. If I worked at a deli and you ordered a sandwich, we would exchange dollars for food and it would be a clear and simple transaction. If I were a candle maker, you would give me money in exchange for a candle. Once again, clear and simple. But what is coaching exactly? So many online coaches promise the world, lose 50 kilos/pounds, have 10K, like $10,000 months, meet the man/woman of your dreams. Each of these things has an asterisk next to it, and in tiny little print that you often need a magnifying glass to read, it says, results not guaranteed. That seems like such a cop-out to me. Results not guaranteed, written so small you can barely read it. I've been a coach since 2017, and in that time I've done over 2,000 individual coaching sessions. And yet it wasn't until today, well, last week when I wrote this, that I finally came across a description of what I do that feels resonant. Let me explain in a story. I have two children, my daughter Xanthi, who is 10, and my son Casimir, who is 8. Xanthi basically taught herself to read. By the time she started school, she was already reading basic words, phrases, and now she reads entire novels that many adults would struggle to attempt. I didn't have to put any effort to help Xanthi to learn. The process was truly effortless. Casimir was a totally different experience. Helping him learn to read was one of the hardest experiences of my life. And my life hasn't been all roses. I've been through some shit. Along the way, he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and this has explained a lot. But as much as the label helped ease my mind, it did nothing with the actual help of the process of him learning to read. There were many days when he was crying and I was crying. I met with his teachers, his speech therapist, his psychotherapist, his occupational therapist. We tried strategy after strategy. It was honestly and gut-wrenchingly It was honestly exhausting and gut-wrenching, and I really questioned whether it would ever be a thing for him. There were discussions about pulling him from mainstream schooling and sending him to a supported learning environment. Note, I'm not opposed to that. We are blessed to have this option available, but it just didn't feel right. We persisted together, day in and day out. We never reached a point where one day he got it, the penny drop moment. Instead, it was baby steps, incremental shifts, slowly over time. Yesterday, Casimir came home from school brandishing this book. And in the newsletter, I have a picture of Casimir and he's holding up a book, Who Pooed in My Loo? And it has a unicorn on it. Trust me, it's hilarious. He read it to me and I cried. Giant, sobbing, happy tears. He read that book and I have never been more proud of anyone or anything than I was in that moment. And I told him that. He said, what about where I stumbled or got a word wrong? I honestly didn't notice, I replied, which was true. That feeling in my body as I sat and listened to my boy read was something that words truly cannot describe. The closest thing I can think of is if we crossed the pinnacle of Everest. Not that I've ever done that, I just imagine what it would feel like. So what has this got to do with coaching? When I work with my clients, ultimately, the thing we achieve is that they have that feeling I had for my son, except about themselves. They feel that feeling inside their body regardless of external results. Whether or not they lose the 50 kilos, pounds, make 10,000 per month, find the love of their life, they have something much more valuable, the ability to believe in themselves. That feeling cannot be bought like a sandwich or a candle. That feeling needs to be forged for yourself, by yourself. It's not an instant. It doesn't just happen in a moment. It happens over time. And that's why I work with people for 6 months. I currently have 2 spots available for my 6-month individual coaching packages. Pricing will be available. There's an application on my website. I'm not going to read out what the pricing is because with podcasts, you could find this a year, 2 years, 5 years from now, my pricing will be different. But I do believe in pricing transparency. I don't hide that. That's another thing some people do that I really grinds my gears. I understand that it's a big commitment. So I do have one-off coaching sessions. I don't nominally offer them. And here's why. Transformation takes time. Like we can achieve a lot in 1 hour, but the true transformation that people are looking for doesn't happen in an instant. You can't buy it like a sandwich. One of my coaches, Joanna Lindenbaum, she talks about the difference between, now I'm riffing, I finished with the newsletter and I'm riffing. She talks about the difference between a breakthrough and a transformation. A breakthrough can happen in an instant. It's an insight, it's an aha, it's like, oh my goodness. When we first moved to where we live now in Sydney, I used to walk the kids to school. We only have one vehicle and my husband would take it into the office. So the kids and I would walk to school. We only knew one way to get there. And it took about 30, 35 minutes. One day we saw some kids in the same uniform that my kids were wearing. And then they took a side turn. And then when we got to the school, they were already there. So I was like, I don't want to follow them. Please don't get any ideas. But I was like, there must be another way to do this. So the breakthrough, the aha, like there is another way to do this, happened in an instant. But the transformation was finding the other path and taking that and nearly cutting the time in half. Like it only takes 20 minutes as opposed to 30 to 35. You can have so many instances where, you might be trying something and you have a session with your coach and they're like, have you thought about this? Have you considered this? You're like, oh my goodness, that sounds incredible. Breakthrough. But that doesn't mean that it happens instantly. The transformation, the showing up on the physical takes time, trial and error, commitment to the action. When I, as a person, have bought a one-off session with someone before, sometimes I've left with like a page or 2 pages full of ideas and excitement and, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. And we hang up the call and then I'm like, now what? So when you work with a coach in a container, in a 6 months together, not only do you set the vision and the goal and you have the breakthrough, but then you work together to get through the transformation. Because sometimes even though you understand it intellectually, putting it into practice the day in, the day out, like my son understood the concept of reading intellectually, but when it came down time to sit down and do it and work it out, the strategies that were working for other kids didn't work for him. It was a process. We had to work on it together. It was slow. And the other thing I want to say about coaching is not everybody needs it. If you go back to the example of my kids, my daughter pretty much taught herself to read and off she went. She had no struggles, issues, concerns. So if that was the case, she was in no need of a coach because she knew what to do and she did it. But there may be other areas of her life where she could benefit from coaching. All of this to say, a lot of people, a lot of coaches are, when you chat to them, I don't want to use the word force, pressure, convince, trying to get you to make a decision on the call. And I don't want anyone to ever feel like that. I never take money from people on the call. I don't take your credit card details at all. If we decide to work together, I give you a link, you put your details in. I never actually capture them or record them in any way, shape, or form. And also, I don't want you to decide on the call. If it takes a couple of chats, connections, back and forth to make sure that we're truly a fit, that is okay. Because if we're going to spend 6 months together, I want to make sure that I think that I can help you with what it is that you want to achieve and you feel that I'm the right fit for you. Because I'm sure we've all been in situations, like I'm thinking back to school, where you're assigned a teacher and some teachers you gel with really well and you have the most magnificent year ever. And other teachers you're like, oh, could this go any slower? And there's not that they're good, bad, right, or wrong people. It's just some personalities, people, they're not a fit. They're not a connection. The average person who works with me has followed me for 18 months. Now, I've been in business since 2017. In the beginning, I used to think, like, what's wrong with me as a coach that it's such a long lead time? Like, do I need? And I went down the path of the hooks and the classes and all the stuff. Like, I thought, like, I'm doing something wrong. But then I realized, no, I'm doing something right. To take the time to connect, to establish rapport. That doesn't mean I coach the people for free. When I say they follow me, they listen to my podcast, they read my newsletter, follow me on YouTube, tune in. Is this the person? Is this the right kind of vibe for me? You know, am I ready for this next step? Because so often things online are promised. They're quick, they're fast. You know, part with your money and you will get this. And there's some urgency, desperation kind of vibe that feels entirely gross to me. Working with my son, as I said, to help him learn to read was a process that I wasn't sure at the end of it whether we were going to have someone who could read. And you might be listening to this going, that's a bit overly dramatic, Suzanne. But everybody has different abilities, different skill sets. As I said, the school was really discussing, do I want to send him to an assisted learning rather than a mainstream school? They didn't pressure, they just encouraged. But my gut, my intuition, my inner knowing was like, no, he'll get there. And as I said, it was a longer, slower trajectory. So if coaching is something that you thinking about doing with me, first thing, if you've listened to this show, the other thing that I offer is I have a YouTube channel, and on there I have, pardon me, a series of recorded coaching episodes. So, and that's another thing too. If you want to do one of those, you're most welcome to. I'll make sure I put the link application for a recording coaching session. You might be listening to this going, why do you have an application? I have an application for any of my coaching, whether it be the coaching session or to work with me. And the reason I don't give people direct access to my calendar anymore, I teach boundaries is one thing, but I want to make sure like you take the time to fill in the form. I have a read of it, make sure that we're both a fit. Because sometimes people listen to something and they're like, oh, yes, I want this. And I want to speak to you tomorrow. Like I've had people DM me back when I used to do DMs. I don't answer DMs now. I do everything via email. Who was like, oh my gosh, I need to speak to you tomorrow. And I would clear my schedule. And 80% of the time, those people would not show up. So now it's like, I don't want the urgency, quick fix, fast, let's do it. Oh my gosh, you're my last hope kind of thing. Because from that point of view, we're not going to work well together. The work that I do, saying no, setting boundaries, finally working on you, self first isn't selfish. It's going to take time. I've got that song in my head. It's going to take time. And I randomly break into song. So, you know, prepare your ears accordingly. But as I said, they've got a YouTube channel with recorded coaching sessions I've done with individuals. When you listen through, it'll become obvious. Some of the people I've worked with before, some of the people I haven't, the range of things. They're not all live yet. Some of them are waiting because I dropped 3 in the first week and now I'm going to release 1 per week. But, you know, people pleasing, boundaries, food, emotional eating, ways to, you know, increase your visibility, these all sorts of things. So yeah, I really want to be clear that I'm not one of these coaches who's going to say, everybody needs coaching. Everyone needs a life coach. And if you don't have a coach, you're a fool or whatever. Because I honestly don't believe that. Not everybody needs a coach. Not everybody needs a coach all of the time. But having a coach, the value of it, the magic of it is to have that person in your corner who, depending on what they offer. So I offer my one-to-one clients Voxer support. With Vox is a voice messaging app. If they don't have that, I am open to using WhatsApp. I prefer Voxer because it has a walkie-talkie mode. So I can talk or you can talk and we can listen while the person is speaking. Whereas WhatsApp, it's fully recorded and then sent. But, you know, you do use a premise that I live by. But to have that, like you get off the session and you're kind of like, well, now what? Then get on the Voxer and say, okay, I'm excited. I don't know where to start. And we can kind of hash that out together, not as a lifeline emergency and not that you talk to me 24/7. It's not like coaching isn't setting you up to need me forever. That's enabling. That's some weird shit I'm not available for. But just if you're stuck, if you're confused, if you're overwhelmed, you have that person to, you know, sound the things off of, and also to check in when things are going well, to celebrate, because I don't think we celebrate enough right now. We're like, oh, I don't want to brag or I don't want to this. Like, I want you to brag. I want to hear about all the exciting, great, wonderful things that are happening, because from that space, I honestly believe we can be an energetic match for more, as opposed to all the things that go wrong, and then more things go wrong, and then we just end up on this downward spiral of shitness. So all of this to say, as we sum up, if you're not yet on my newsletter, suzannekohlberg.com/newsletter, highly recommend that you sign up. If you want to discuss coaching, if you go to my website, suzannekohlberg.com, there's an application form to fill in there. If we get on a call together, you will not be pitched on that call. You will not have to get your credit card out. You will not sign up. It's honestly a, what are you looking for? Am I a fit? And I honestly don't mind if you say yes or no. Like, I'm the nope coach. If you say nope, that kind of makes me just as happy as if you say yes. I really want it to be a win-win. But even if you do say yes, I encourage you to go sleep on it, think about it, talk about it with your partner and significant other. Really be clear that this is something that you want to do, not on a whim, not on a hope and a prayer, because there's so much pressure in that. And if neither of those options feel great for you, but you want to watch some actual coaching sessions to see the style of coaching that I do, there is a playlist on YouTube. I'll link it in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to catch you on the next one. Bye for now.